So at the sound of the tone, it's 4:16. So let's get started with our June main event. Welcome everyone interested in quality continuing education for building design professionals to today's credited presentation, which is keys to a successful green roof. I'm your host, Michael Murphy, and on behalf of Murphy Brothers Contracting, thank you all for joining us for today's presentation, coming to you live on the ubiquitous EarthKind Energy webinar Zoom platform. Anyways, as many of you know, Murphy Brothers Contracting is known throughout the greater Westchester, Lower Hudson Valley, Southern Fairfield region for award-winning construction projects. And for more information on how easy it is to work with Murphy Brothers Contracting's team, just visit our website, which is murphybrothers.com for residential or mbccomm.com for commercial, or just call me at 914-424-3422. I'd like to thank our sponsors today, Sustainable Westchester and Westchester Home. Did you know Westchester Home Magazine is hosting live their 2021 Westchester Home Design Awards? It's their 10th annual awards presentation, and several past award winners are in the audience today. And did I say live? Yes, live on June 16th, next week, at the beautiful Wainwright House in Rye. It starts at 6 p.m. And for more information, go to Westchester Magazine's website or just call me or email me. I'll be there. Will you? So if any of you want AIA credit this session and you haven't already, you know who you are. Please send me your 8-digit AIA number. Everyone in attendance will receive by email an official attendance certificate courtesy of the good folks at Columbia Green Technologies. So before we go any further, I would like to have a word from our sponsor first, EarthKind Energy, Ron Kamen.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity, and especially thank you to all the sponsors, and especially Murphy Brothers Contracting. So EarthKind Energy has been around for over 35 years. We've worked with a lot of different kinds of customers, some of whom you'll recognize, both in the government sector, in the authority sector, municipalities, etc. Lots of nonprofits, universities, colleges, schools, etc., plus many for-profits, and not the least of which one of our favorite clients in the for-profit sector, Murphy Brothers Contracting. To give you a sense, as Larry said, we are moving quickly to electrification of everything. That's going to be clean electricity, clean heating and cooling, clean transportation, all powered by clean electricity. And right now, today, part of what EarthKind does is we arrange for grants on these technologies so that you can make this transition. Today, the state has $1.5 billion for incentives on clean electricity, $680 million on clean heating and cooling technologies, and over $650 million for clean transportation, electric vehicles and charging stations. Plus there's tax credits, plus there's low interest financing until inflation hits. Right now, some of the lowest cost financing ever in our lifetimes. Energy as a service, so that means that without cash, you can also get these technologies installed and just pay for it over time out of the energy savings, plus positive publicity and community recognition. And if that's not enough to get you interested, what you should know is that if you don't do this stuff really soon, what you're going to see coming up are penalties. Just as in New York City, we now have New York City Local Law 97, where about 50 cents per square foot is what the penalties will be starting in 2024 if you do not hit greenhouse gas goals. And this is happening across the state with something called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which puts us on a path to zero carbon. Right now, it's incentivized to make those transitions. Tomorrow, it's going to be penalties. So do it now. Make that savings, get the return on investments, or pay later. And to make Larry's point, change is happening quickly. And to give you a sense of how fast change can happen, last century, this is what New York City looked like, all horse and buggies, one car in 1900. And how long did it take till it was all cars and just one horse and buggy? Only 13 years. So these changes that Larry's talking about with the F-150 Ford coming in, we've got the Ford Mustang E already out. In addition to Tesla, every manufacturer has electric vehicles. GM is phasing out their combustion engine vehicles by 2035, Volvo by 2030. New York State Legislature just passed legislation phasing out all combustion vehicles by 2035 as well. It's happening now. Make the transition while you can, take advantage of the incentives, and let's go. Back to you, Mr. Murphy.
Okay, let's bring it down a little bit here. Before we get to our main event, let's hear from our special CBD sponsor, Bright Wellness Energy. Bring up Bonnie Hagan for a moment.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Murphy Brothers, for letting me share a few words with you today. I'm Bonnie Hagan, and Bright Energy Hemp Extract contains CBD and other cannabinoids, such as THC, and many people who use our products, and I'll show you right now, this is our topical salve, and this is one of our tinctures right here. Many people who use our products report improved health, reduced pain and inflammation, enhanced sleep, and reduced anxiety and depression, all without getting high. We're based in Westchester County, New York, and our oral tinctures and our topical salves are 100% legal. Unlike many of our competitors, our farmers use organic, sustainable, and regenerative growing processes, and we never use herbicides or pesticides or harsh extraction chemicals. We do not add any fillers or dyes or any sort of artificial ingredients to our products. All our products contain the purest sources of antioxidants and neuroprotectants that help protect and rebalance the body's central nervous system. And as a special thank you today, we're giving all of today's attendees a special offer. Please visit us at brightenergywellness.com. That's brightenergywellness.com, and use code Murphy10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. That's MURPHY 10 to get 10% off your order. And once again, this offer is only available for 24 hours. So if you're interested, the time is right. And thank you so much, Michael and Murphy Brothers Contracting.
Thank you, Bonnie. And for all of you that want to get high out there, this is New York State. It is legal. So you probably just go out in the street and get some. Anyways, during the presentation, the always amazing EarthKind Energy, Mr. EarthKind Energy himself, Ron Kamen, will be collecting your questions for our presenter in our official Zoom chat box. We'll tackle those questions afterwards. You are all on mute, so just sit back and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the AIA accredited portion of our presentation, Keys to Successful Green Roofs. Our presenter is a registered landscape architect with over 6 years in the green roof industry. Her focus is on low impact development and green infrastructure, as well as she's well versed in all phases of green roof project design, construction, and maintenance. Please welcome from Columbia Green Technologies, coming to us live all the way from Portland, Oregon, Miss Andrea Savin. Andrea, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. And thank you so much to Murphy Brothers for inviting us here. I'm going to get my screen shared and we can rock and roll. I'm not quite as good at the fast talking that everybody else is, but we will do our best to get through everything and talk through our green roof. So I'm Andrea Savin with Columbia Green Technologies. We are a national green roof manufacturer all across the country. We've been in business for over a decade. Our focus is very specifically on green roofs. You know, we don't do green walls or swales or other projects. Green roofs is our specific focus. I would say we're the experts in this field. So today we're going to talk through presentations, keys to a successful green roof. This is we're going to both touch on what green roofs are, but then we're also going to talk about some innovations with green roofs as well. So we're not just going to hit the basics. We're going to kind of touch a little bit on some of the different kind of green roof innovations as we see these systems in the US longer. They're evolving, getting on taller buildings and being used in more creative ways. So this presentation will touch on that as well. We've got our provider information and course number info here, but again, if you follow up with your AIA numbers, we'll make sure those of you that want credit get credit for this presentation. So we'll do our AIA slides here as well. Again, we're going to be talking about green roofing, green roof assemblies, and then we'll go as far as talking about long-term maintenance and specifying green roofs as well. So when we're talking about green roofs, I think, you know, originally green roofs were thought of as more of a kind of a fad, but they definitely more and more we're seeing green roofs happening all across the country, not even just in our big cities. We're seeing green roof mandates being rolled out, San Francisco, Portland, Denver, Toronto, DC, New York City has their green and solar mandates as well. Green roofs have actual, ASTM guidelines, requirements. They are tested, studied to understand how they function. We're seeing them outside of the urban core and suburban areas, rural areas, and also seeing them more and more being added voluntarily instead of just as requirements for stormwater management or green coverage on a project. So I'm going to talk a little more specifically about these drivers. Hitting on stormwater management, we're going to talk about building healthy places, more on large scale developments and how building owners are driving to increase their asset value and sustainability with adding green roofs. So I think the biggest thing with green roofs and what's pushed the installation of green roofs across the country is this issue that we have with managing our stormwater. We have an aging national infrastructure. All of our big cities have very old pipes and very old stormwater treatment systems. So we're having the big issue is combined sewer overflow. So during large rain events, your stormwater and your sewer system are combined together. So during those large events, those systems get overwhelmed and you have combined sewer overflows into your water bodies, your local water bodies. So obviously that is not good. You do not want sewage flowing into our rivers, and the EPA is charging for this as well. Cities are getting huge fees. Also, just underground pipes are getting old. They're breaking. There's an estimated 240,000 water main breaks a year in the US. And then also just this issue of water backing up in streets and flooding, or I feel like you're always seeing in the news something about a sinkhole, popping up underneath a parking lot or something, which is all due again to like the water erosion from these leaking pipes. So the best thing that we can do with this underground system, because it'd be astronomically expensive to upgrade everything, is to try and keep this stormwater out of the underground system entirely. So that is kind of the big idea behind a green roof. We initially had our pastoral landscapes. This is prior to our urban development. And then of course, typical urban development, it's all hardscape, it's all parking lots, it's all buildings. All that rain that's coming down is just rushing off and into our underground pipes. So now cities, developers, etc., are looking at adding green infrastructure like green roofs to our projects to help absorb that water where it falls. So the rain's getting absorbed. It's not going into those pipes, or it's at least slowing down when it hits that city system, so that you significantly decrease the problem that you're causing downstream. So looking to both at project scale and then also community scale for this effective stormwater. We can absorb it all where it hits instead of having it rush off and become somebody else's problem. That's ideal. And it's more and more cities are writing their code or their requirements to have a certain amount of green coverage on their site for this reason. I just have this slide just to make sure that everyone understands that it's not anecdotal that green roofs help with stormwater management. And when I talk about managing the stormwater, it's really focused on retention versus detention. So the idea being the main benefit of the green roof is it retains that water that hits it. It doesn't just slow it down, it holds it kind of like a sponge, and then the water evaporates or is used by the plants. So I have this table here, you can see in the lower right corner. There's a gray line showing a conventional roof runoff versus a green roof, the runoff from a large rain event. So you can see this is a 2.5-inch rain event, which is a pretty big storm. You can see not only does the green roof delay runoff, but it significantly reduces the amount of water that runs off that building. And in a lot of cases with your typical lighter rain event, you don't have runoff from the green roof. It has the ability to absorb a significant amount of water. So just, making sure everyone understands that the growing media, the systems are tested to understand how much water is retained, and green roof manufacturers should have lab testing showing that data. This is a case study. This is an office building in Seattle. And in this particular building, they were able to actually value engineer a green roof onto the building, which is, it's usually the other way around, I've found in my experience. So in this building, they were able to show that a combination of a stormwater cistern and green roof could absorb enough water so that they didn't have to upgrade their underground stormwater connection, which would have, that would have cost tearing up the road, upgrading the pipes, stopping traffic, significant upset there. So through that process of showing that they could do the same thing by holding the water on site, they weren't required to upsize that pipe. And they had a $70,000 savings for adding, this green technology to their project. Building healthy places to live and work. Green roofs are tying really closely in with that. I liked Larry's intro in talking about that kind of flexibility of design and looking how, we started off in these little cubicles with no even views of windows. Then, we started to evolve into maybe adding some plants and access to light in buildings, but now we're seeing more and more of that. Larger businesses are adding these outdoor spaces, and typically green roof type spaces that their employees can use. And that is, they're using it as a significant way to bring in new employees as well. Same with, building owners for apartments or other spaces as well. These outdoor spaces are really appealing to people, having that kind of natural access to light, to air, having opportunities for fitness, being able to do farming or beekeeping. We've seen being able to, pick your own food from your roof deck. Also, they've done a lot of studies showing how green roofs can actually reduce people's stress levels. So they did, for instance, in Australia, they did a study with a bunch of elementary students, and they had half of them take a test while they were looking at a bare roof, and the other half take a test where they had a green roof. And those that had those views of green had a significantly better results on their test. So just that idea of that views of green really calm people. And, building owners, or not building, companies are seeing that it's actually increasing their bottom line. It's increasing worker productivity, and their workers are taking less sick days. So an example of that would be Amazon. This is their headquarters up in Seattle, Washington, and they have added green roofs on all their buildings up there because of that idea of wanting to bring green into the workplace. They've even have this huge kind of crazy terrarium where they have almost a rainforest, and that is their all of their conference rooms are in this kind of tropical rainforest as well, just as ways to bring green to their employees, to increase their employee happiness ultimately, and to have them work harder. Green roofs are a great opportunity to create habitat for bees and other pollinators. As we probably all know, there's been a lot of concern about the decrease in honeybees, 40% loss since 2006. So the great thing about green roofs is they can create these resting spaces, these habitat connections through cities. And also there's a lot lower pesticide use typically on a green roof. So bees find it, really friendly habitat for them, less concern with, bee die off by some type of chemical or other concerns like that. Designers are even looking at adding certain pollinators on green roofs to help support your butterflies, your bees, other invertebrates, or even, birds moving through a city as well. Green roofs provide a safe space. The large scale developments and districts, kind of like I was mentioning, are looking at kind of adding green roofs more on a large scale versus just a building by building approach. This is a project in Portland, Oregon. It's called Haslow and 8th. And this project was kind of based all around water. So they deal with all of their stormwater and sewer on site for this project. So they saved a significant amount of money in that they're not, they're not actually using their connection to the city's sewer and storm system for this project. So they have a natural organic recycling machine underground that's treating all of their gray and black water. And then they have cisterns and green roof system that is collecting all of their green roof or collecting all of their stormwater for the project. So the green roofs provided a key piece in that they're absorbing all the stormwater that would normally run off these buildings and flow into the underground city pipes. So they actually had a significant return on investment for all of these kind of updated equipment because they didn't have to connect into the city system. So green roofs can provide an increased asset value for buildings. Adding these sustainable upgrades like green roofs, they can lead to 10% higher property valuations. Apartments find they can charge about 16% average higher rents if they have a green roof on the building. The green roof itself covers the roof membrane, so it can double the life of the roof membrane just by providing that protective layer. And also that kind of thermal layer there helps bring reduced energy consumption, so heating and cooling. They've found that green roofs perform a little bit better when they're dry versus when they're wet. So I get asked sometimes by architects what the R value of green roofs is, and it does tend to fluctuate depending on if the system's saturated or not. So in the summer, it typically provides the most kind of help with that cooling the building. And also if, for instance, you have your air intake for your air conditioning up on a green roof. Green roofs are typically a lot cooler. It's that whole heat idea of the heat island effect. So having these green spaces on your roofs, the roofs are typically about 5 to 10 degrees cooler in the summer. So if your air intakes for your air conditioning is kind of pulling in from that cooler air, it's going to run a lot more efficiently. Kind of tying in with that increased asset value. The GSA, the General Services Administration of the federal government that manages all the government buildings, they're putting green roofs now on all of their buildings because they're finding this return on investment by adding a green roof. This project is 50 United Nations Plaza. This was an existing building in San Francisco. And they added combination green and solar to this building. And I really like this image because it does show how green roofs and solar can work well together. A lot of times, I think when we look at roofs, we kind of look to choose one or the other. Are we going to put solar panels up there, or are we going to put green roof up there? But they actually function really well together. The cooler conditions in the summer can help the solar panels work better. They actually function better once temperatures get higher. The solar panels can then add some shade, provide maybe some opportunities for plant diversity. And a green roof can actually ballast your solar racking. So the green roof can actually provide a function there as well. And that is kind of a system that has been evolving as well, how the two really work well together. So this is just talking about the market value of sustainability, about how 50% of green building is now driven by client demand. So there's a lot of pressure now, I think, to show that you are green, or these CEOs can show that they have a green building because being sustainable is very, very marketable now. This is, I think, a good side-by-side example. Both of these buildings are LEED Platinum. which one is easier to market as green. I mean, that's the thing about a green roof, is it's like a green billboard, a sustainability billboard for a building. Green roof can contribute toward 16 to 20 different lead points. They don't, I wouldn't, 16 to 20, they can't bring you standalone, but in combination with other approaches with a project, you can get a lot of different lead points. Some of those include the protect or restore habitat or open space, looking at heat island reduction or different kind of creative rainwater management or water use points as well. Green roofs can tie into different other standards, like making sure the systems are have material transparency or work with the Declare label or Living Building Challenge. Green roofs can help you get points for these, or green roof manufacturers should be able to provide you information on their materials transparency for their systems. Some of the innovations in green roofs I want to touch on. We're starting to see more and more green roofs being designed on wood structure buildings, and different parts of the country are moving forward with this faster than others. But I think there was initially concerns with the structural capacity of a wood structure building to have green roofs on them. Just green roofs have really evolved to be very lightweight, being able to dial in the right mix of growing media and the right soil depth, and understanding how, what is the saturated weight of that system. As long as you can kind of coordinate that with your green roof manufacturer and with your structural engineer, it's becoming very common now to have green roofs on wood frame buildings and also on existing buildings. Existing buildings often don't have a lot of extra leeway as far as structurally what they can take. So green roofs just have to be dialed in very closely. This is a case study. This is the old Chicago post office in Chicago. This beautiful green roof was just installed about a year ago, and it is pretty amazing. That's their old historical post office. They've added basketball courts, tennis courts, they have a bar up there, all sorts of outdoor meeting spaces. You can see how this ties in really well with COVID, having all this nice outdoor meeting space as well. So this project has only 6 inches of soil, and the soil media the weight of the soil was dialed in very closely in order to make sure that it didn't exceed the structural capacity of the building. But you can see the amazing things you can add to a boring blank rooftop, as long as you coordinate the weights and things as well. So this project just turned out really beautiful. Another innovation we see pop up on projects as well is the idea of a blue roof, or a combination blue roof green roof system. So a blue roof is essentially creating a detention tank, turning your roof into a detention tank. So it's essentially just adding a slow drain to your roof drain. And instead of having water just flow right off your roof, it's held as it would in a detention tank and then slowly metered out down the roof drain. I think designs for this type of system are still evolving, but the benefit there is you don't need to excavate underground to put in a detention tank to hold water. If you're maxed out on your site, you can retain water on the roof. And we're seeing 2 green roof manufacturers that they're stacking them. So they have a green roof tray system or layered system with underneath allowing for, say, 4-inch depth water holding capacity for the roof. So this is a project in Chicago that had this combination blue roof, green roof. So the green roof will hold the water, most of the water that hits it. Anything that drains out will flow down into this blue roof system, or other blank roof areas could be piped into this blue roof system as well. as we get more and more green roofs, we're seeing green roofs on taller and taller buildings, or just buildings that are in more windier areas. So when you look at green roofs and think about green roofs and wind, what you need to account for is that wind uplift pressure. So that's as the wind hits the building and it travels up and over the parapet, so that roof edge, it actually creates a suctioning pressure. So you need to ensure that your green roof is essentially heavier, or it's going to stay in place with that uplift suctioning pressure. Pressures get higher as your building gets taller, and also pressures are higher at the perimeter of the roof and at the corners of the roof. So in a lot of cases, designs for taller buildings will actually hold the green roof back from the roof edges. They'll do maybe strapped pavers at the perimeter, or they'll add some actual rock ballast layer into the green roof just to add some weight to ensure that it's heavier than that suctioning pressure. Other ways of securing the planting, adding some netting. That's just something to take an extra look at on projects that are over, say, 6, 7 stories, just understanding what the wind pressures are, working with your structural engineer to understand what the wind pressures are with the green roof design. And your green roof manufacturer should be able to help you with that as well. There is a, here at the bottom, I have the ANSI SPRY RP14 wind design standard for vegetative roofing systems. They do have design tables that talk about, in what heights you can do green roofs and what type of green roof you need. It's a fairly limited standard in that it only really looks at very thin green roof systems. So if your project goes beyond the design tables in that standard, you can reach out to your green roof manufacturer with questions on ways to make it work on taller buildings. In this photo, for example, they actually just added a big glass wall to help reduce the wind pressures on the green roof. Green roofs can also be installed on sloped roofs. So if your roof slope is under 2 and 12, you're fine. But once you get steeper than that, the concern is that the green roof itself will just slide right off that roof, which is not something you want. So you can get some amazing effects with these sloped green roofs just because it makes them a lot more highly visible when they're kind of at a lower angle. Green roof manufacturers have these expanded kind of accordion style media retention fabrics that they use to hold the growing media in place. Typically, aircraft cable runs through that fabric and is physically attached to the roof edge or the roof or the parapet. That it works great, but it takes a lot more coordination between your landscape architect, your architect, and your structural engineer to make sure that's designed properly. So it takes a little bit more work, but it definitely can be done. I like to touch on options for lightweight fill on green roofs. Typically on specifications and drawings, we often just see kind of the same foam that's used for insulation, the XPS foam, your Dow, DuPont, your Owens Corning, also used as lightweight fill in the green roof. So by lightweight fill, I mean, sometimes you want to do some mounding, but you don't want to pay for the depth of soil, or you don't need that extra weight of, say, 3 feet of soil. You just want to get some mounding happening. So then they can stack foam up as a very lightweight kind of filler up on the roof. Or we see this too as, lifting different systems on a roof to align with other systems, or infilling in a planter, again, to have more minimal soil, but a taller planter. So just understanding what your lightweight fill options are. XPS foam is your typical thermal insulation for your roof. And then EPS foam, expanded polystyrene, is designed and tested to be a structural fill type of foam. It doesn't have the extra chemicals added to have extra insulation like extruded polystyrene foam is, and And it's also typically a lot less expensive. So I kind of see the two used interchangeably. There is a difference between them. And EPS geofoam is typically the right choice for green roof fill. I kind of in the idea here of innovations, I like to talk about this cool product that they just started manufacturing in the United States about a year ago. This is a recycled foam glass aggregate. So it's made of 99% post-consumer recycled glass, and they heat it up and add a foaming agent, and it just kind of puffs up like popcorn and naturally breaks into these, 1.5 to 2 inch aggregate. And it is a very lightweight product. It is very, very strong. You can see its compressive strength is about 100 pounds per square inch, which is very strong, stronger than most foams. It has also an insulation ability, but the biggest thing we're seeing that's interesting architects and landscape architects is that it is a class 1 or class A product. It doesn't spread fire, it doesn't melt, it doesn't create smoke. So as we're having more of these outdoor spaces and wanting to keep them safe for the residents, having products like this that are not only eco-friendly and made from recycled materials, but also doesn't promote the spread of fire is really beneficial. They've been making this in Europe and Germany for over a decade, but they just started manufacturing it here. It's in the kind of Philadelphia area where they're using it, and it's a great product. And it also, because I think it's important to add, it's not a premium product. It costs pretty similarly to your XPS foam. Here's just I like adding cool green roof photos. Here's some sedum and bloom. So now we're going to talk about the different types of green roof systems. So these are the categories that we see pop up when talking about green roof systems. Extensive green roofs are the thinnest systems. And so by thin, I mean the thinnest amount of soil or growing media. Semi-intensive is in the middle, that's 6 to 12 inch depth. Extensive is typically 3 to 5 inch. And then the deeper systems are intensive green roof systems are 12 inch soil depth and deeper. So that's where you start to see these rooftop gardens, trees, shrubs, all types of plants up on top of structure. Green roof companies have an array of different type of green roof systems. They have your layered system, which is your built up system. Pre-grown tray, that's where it comes in a plastic tray with the soil and plants already in it, and it's just placed down on the roof and then planted in place, which is sort of a hybrid between the two. It's a kind of combination tray and layered, where the trays are installed empty and then filled with soil and plants on site. Talking about the components of the layered system, the built-up system. Typically, you have your roof assembly, which is topped by either your roof insulation, if it's a hot rubber type application, or your sheet waterproofing, depending on if you have which type of roof system you're using. You want to add a root barrier either below your insulation or on your roof membrane. So root barrier is kind of the first. Up from there, drainage layer. So the point of a drainage layer is to allow for, once water starts draining through your green roof, you want it to move efficiently to the nearest roof drain. So that drainage layer sits at the roof level and allows for free drainage of any water that makes its way through the green roof system to move off the roof. And it also allows for some airflow to the roots of the plants. A drainage layer will typically have a filter fabric adhered to it, and that's going to prevent any roots or soil particles from making its way down into that drainage layer or making its way, down the roof drain. Thinner green roof systems will have a water retention layer, often a polyester kind of batting type lightweight fabric, It adds extra water retention and not a lot of extra weight. It helps slow the water down as it moves through the system and stores water for plants as well. So this system, the layer system, is very flexible. It will allow anywhere from 3 inches to 4 feet plus 5 feet, 6 feet of soil depth. You can just build up from whatever your imagination brings you. Here's some installation photos. The different components are just kind of rolled out like carpet rolls. Your root barrier, your drainage layer, your water retention layer are rolled out on site. The perimeter is held in by a L-shaped, typically an L-shaped aluminum edger that just kind of creates those planter walls around it. Media is brought up either in, bagged in big super sacks that are split open and spread out, or bulk as well if they have the ability to blow the soil up onto the roof. So the media is then spread to the depth required, and the system is then planted per your landscape design, either with pre-grown sedum tiles or plants, depending on your design. I'd just like to touch on that these amenity deck projects are green roofs as well. They just are a different type of green roof. These more intensive green roofs require a lightweight growing media with a little more organics to it, more than just your typical sedum roof. I mean, sedum can grow like on a rock. They don't need a lot. But once you start adding larger plant material, you just need to make sure that your growing media mix is an intensive mix that can support that type of plant material. Being able to wrap these amenity decks into the green roof manufacturer's warranty is a really valuable addition for the building owner, instead of just throwing some soil and planters, etc. Having it all wrapped together along with the pavers and all the other components into a warranty is really ideal. Tray systems. The benefit of a tray system, it's a very simple system. When considering specifying trays, you need to think about what depth you want for the trays, how they connect with each other, how they drain. It's very important, the tray design, looking at trays that overlap and interlock with each other. Over time, those that just are set next to each other can start to migrate as the building kind of settles. And then once you have these gaps in the green roof, well, that's where your runoff or your water is going to go, is down these cracks instead of actually going into your green roof and being absorbed. So making sure that the design or that the tray design is such that it's making sure to capture all this rain runoff. Understanding the media depth of your tray. Some manufacturers will say they have a 4-inch tray, but it's really a 3.5-inch tray. And really, once you look at it, it only has about 2.5 inches of media inside it, which is pretty thin for a plant to survive. It's going to cost less, but your green roof will likely fail over time with that thin of a soil depth. So just make sure when you're specifying trays that you really understand what you're getting. Here's some installation photos of the pre-grown trays. They just pretty much lay out like Legos, just pop them down, you get beautiful green coverage. Here's some images of that hybrid system, planted in place tray. This only works with trays that overlap with each other, so you don't get media on the underlying roof surface. The system, they can be overfilled by up to 8 inches, and then you have a lot more flexibility with your planting. You can plant them with sedum mats or custom plants. It's just an example of a project using that planted in place tray system. It has a shorter lead time typically than pre-grown trays. You can integrate drip irrigation into the system if you like a tray base but want to have a drip system. It's kind of the advantages of the tray and layered combined together. On this slide, I just like to really emphasize the importance of the quality in the growing media and plants, understanding that there is guidelines for the quality of media. I personally believe that growing media is kind of the most important component of a green roof system, making sure that you have a media that's going to hold its structure for ideally the life of your, your roof membrane. So 20 years plus, they need to make sure they have a very high quality, lightweight aggregate within it that's going to hold its structure, not compress over time, which would cause the plants to suffer. Also making sure your growing media has a good water retention ability to actually hold the water that hits it as well. It's very important. And then plants as well, they're very important to the system. They're what uses the water that hits the green roof that allows it to be ready for the next rain event. They also help cool the air, provide that evapotranspiration and shade, and they help with just covering the media and prevent it from blowing off in a wind event. So just the plant coverage itself helps with the green roof system. I like to touch briefly on green roof warranties. I think initially, historically, it was the roof manufacturers that first came out with green roof systems, and they wrote the specifications so that the green roofs were provided by the roofing manufacturers. A lot of specs are still written that way. So we see that as typically listed as a single source warranty, where the warranty for the green roof is provided by the roof manufacturer. The problem with that is, there's so many other items on top of a roof that aren't, provided by that roof manufacturer. So I think a lot of times there's this idea, well, if there's a leak, I want to make sure I have that kind of single source coverage. But green roof manufacturers now have really evolved. They have similar warranty coverages. That big concern with, if there's a roof leak, I need someone to come in, remove this chunk of green roof and replace it again. Green roof manufacturers have that overburden warranty coverage as well. So that way you can really specify the green roof system that you want and the roof system that you want. And if either of them changes, it doesn't have to change the other. Most green roof manufacturers have gone on top of every type of roof membrane, so there really isn't any reason why the two need to be paired together. Touching just briefly on lessons learned and maintenance. Very important to look at how you plant your green roof. It's a lot less expensive if you have an extensive green roof to specify sedum, little tiny sedum plugs or pots, or what they call sedum cuttings, which essentially they just mow a bunch of sedum, throw the chunks down and water them a whole bunch until they start rooting in. The challenges we see with planting very small plants is over time, if they're not really very well cared for, they can suffer. Birds will come, pick them. If they're not watered enough, the media will heat up and kill the plants. There certainly can be successful, absolutely. They just take a little bit of extra care from the whoever's doing the installation and care. This image is showing what I would recommend instead, which would be using a pre-grown sedum tile or a pre-grown sedum mat. It comes kind of like grass turf. You just roll it out and you get instant soil coverage and mature plants growing, and it looks beautiful on day one for your photos. Here's some images just of sedum kind of over the seasons. They're called green roofs, but they can really change color. They look really beautiful, blooming yellow in the spring. In the winter, they tend to kind of turn a little bit red. A lot of them will lose their leaves. They go dormant in the winter. I think that's important too to understand. This is just showing some images of perennials planted in the sedum. And I like to, when I'm talking with architects, to talk about making sure the timing of the installation as well. You want to make sure these things are planted at the end so they don't get trampled by other trades. And just making sure you really consider your total cost of ownership. How it's designed is so important in the long-term care. So that is the official end of our AIA presentation. I wanted to briefly introduce Kyle Farron from our team. Are you there, Kyle? He had
I am.
Slides we want to touch on.
I will. Thank you, Andrea. And thank you all for joining us today. I will be as brief as I can. I want to thank Michael as well from Murphy Brothers Contracting for having us here. I will touch on a project here in a moment that I think you all would be interested in the Westchester area and specifically Harrison. And thank you, Larry, for your insight today earlier. Briefly, just wanted to touch on the New York City Climate Mobilization Act. Ron also kind of touched on this on the local law 97. There's, as of late 2019, there is now local laws 92 and 94, which basically just establishes what's called a sustainable roofing zone. So basically, all new buildings and major renovations will need to consider the usable roof area for green roof and or solar. There is quite a few exceptions here. I will not get into all of that, but it is creating quite a bit of demand for green roof spaces and solar on the roof. So just something that we want to bring up. We are navigating this as well. It is new and there is a bit of bureaucracy to it, but there are also some incentives. So if you go next slide, Andrea, please. This is the grant program that is a part of it as well. There is a minimum here of 5,000 square foot of green roof area and a soil depth minimum of 1.5 inches. Per Andrea's slides here, we would definitely recommend a bit more than 1.5 inches anyway. So if you have a project of this size, this is something to consider for paying for a good portion of your project. A lot of red tape here, to be quite honest, and it probably takes about 12 months with the DOB in New York City to get your submittals through and approved. Next slide, please, Andrea. This is the other side of it, a tax abatement, which everybody in New York, especially property owners, love. There is a $5.23 per square foot tax abatement that is available. Your pathways are here on the right side between solar and green roof. You can obviously do both. And there is also some priority districts, basically in some of the areas of both Manhattan and the Brooklyn areas, and I think a partial part of Queens possibly as well, but there's priority districts which are up to $15 per square foot. So if your project falls within that, you can get quite a substantial tax abatement from the green roof and or solar option. So there is incentives to do this as well that New York is offering. Next slide, please. And I just want to briefly touch on Harrison Playhouse. This is an adaptive reuse project by Verco Properties in Harrison, New York. It is the old Harrison Playhouse Theater, a 1920s era theater that has sat vacant for a long time and is now being changed into a transit-oriented development. So we helped Murphy Brothers on this project deliver an amenity deck space, which kind of speaks to where we are at in the world with folks needing outside, biophilia, folks basically wanting to get outside after COVID, during COVID, but also the property owners needing to differentiate themselves and their properties in general. So this is big in New Jersey as well. I am based on the Jersey Shore here for Columbia Green and handling the Northeast. So I see this a lot. The demand for amenity decks is tremendous. And this is just a great example of it that's coming to the Harrison area. So this is also a Fitwell building, which basically just speaks to what we all know already, that we're trying to design sustainably, but for the human element. The people are the most important, and how they interact with and utilize the built environment is very important. So this is a good example, and we basically would just like to offer to you all on this webinar a tour at some point this summer. So if anybody's interested, we would love to show you the green roof trays that are part of this rooftop amenity deck, and also just the building itself that Murphy Brothers has delivered for Verco. So something to keep in mind for all of you going forward, and certainly reach out to us with any questions on this. You can see here some of the renderings. I was going to include some pictures, but it is still in progress. So I believe it would probably be completed this summer and certainly available for you all to come visit with us. So we wanted to offer that to you. And now I'll punt it back to Ron, and Andrea and I will be happy to take any questions that you all may have. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, guys. Okay, so first question, do green roofing specification installations cause roofing warranty issues?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so they can cause definitely confusion for sure. Often if you often have a landscape architect who writes a green roof spec and the architect who writes a roofing spec, but they don't talk to each other about how the warranty coverages are written. So sometimes we do see specifications that conflict with each other as far as warranties. So that's just something that's really important when you specify the green roof products and your roofing products, just to make sure and double check that those warranties don't conflict. Who is covering what is very important. It's very easy to write. It just, we just see it kind of, it can get a little confusing, I think, with different people on the project team writing those specs.
Excellent. So roofing contractors often talk about load and moisture issues as their concerns. How would you balance that with your kind of comprehensive, extensive installations versus the more modular tray systems?
Great. Yeah. So with any of these systems, they all float on top of the roof membrane, right? Our systems don't require any puncturing of the membrane. Everything just sits on top, making sure you have a root barrier under your layered system. If you have really big plant material, maybe beefing it up from a 20 mil to a 30 mil will help protect that waterproof membrane. Tray systems, you typically just need a lighter slip sheet between the trays and the waterproofing as well. But in general, we've been in business for a decade and have yet to see a project where a green roof has caused any sort of moisture problem in the building. So that the whole idea and the whole way the system is designed is just to ensure it just floats right on top of that. And as long as you design the proper membrane for the building, you're going to be fine.
All right. Well, how much maintenance is really required, and will it have to be replaced at some point?
For your kind of standard extensive sedum planted green roof, it's typically, we say it's low maintenance, but not no maintenance. So you maybe need your team to go up there once a month, pick some weeds, make sure your drains are clear, ensure that any irrigation systems might be working well. If you do have more of like a rooftop garden, then you're going to have to consider kind of the same type of maintenance as you would with those types of plantings on the ground. It's going to be a little more intensive there, but just your standard sedum green roof about once a month. It's a pretty easy maintenance.
And will it have to be replaced? Like, what's the lifespan?
Oh yeah, no. So the idea with the green roof, typical green roof manufacturer warranties are 20 years. So the idea being that you put this green roof in and it's there for the life of the membrane. I mean, certainly membranes last beyond that. You may need to have your maintenance team test the soil, maybe add a little fertilizer here and there, or another lift of compost over a longer time, maybe 10 years that your system's been up there, just to give it a little boost. But the design of these systems is that they won't need to be replaced until the roof itself needs to be replaced.
All right. Well, what are some of the challenges that kill the finished product?
I would say, not understanding irrigation requirements. In most cases, for just sedum, they do fine year round, as long as you have designed a deep enough soil depth. That 1.5 inch soil depth that Kyle mentioned, well, it's not going to be, it's going to dry up so quickly. The sedum aren't going to succeed there. So making sure you have enough soil depth for your plants. We'll also see, you'll get some kind of unique conditions on a roof, like deep shade or the reflected heat off windows. Some things you can't even 100% predict, but making sure you use a really broad mix of sedum is going to help. So those that enjoy shade will take off in those areas, and others that like sun will take off in other areas too. But it's not a finicky system. In most rooftop situations, a green roof is going to be very successful.
Excellent. And how is wind uplift and windborne debris addressed with a green roof system?
Yeah, so I touched a little bit on wind uplift, just making sure that you understand what the wind pressures are and you design your system accordingly. You do want to make sure that on really windy areas, you have your soil, that lightweight growing media can start to blow if it doesn't have coverage. So sometimes on taller buildings, we'll see like a jute netting or something that's going to help hold that soil in place until your plants mature over time. As long as it's something that's addressed on taller buildings by your green roof manufacturer, it should be designed well. But there are buildings that are too tall for a green roof. And in those cases, you don't want to put one up there.
Great. Has anyone ever tried to mix an urban rooftop vegetable garden with the water retention green roof?
To mix them? Well, so we definitely see a ton of interest in kind of rooftop agriculture. It will 100% provide a stormwater management element to that. I think what we've seen is the problem with people up there gardening is they're going to bring their own plants, they're going to bring their own compost, they're going to bring their own fertilizer. You have a lot less control over that system. So thinking it as like a functioning and understanding its stormwater management capacity kind of changes a little when you have that kind of human element in it versus like an extensive green roof that's up on top of the roof somewhere. So that's just something to consider if you do have people up there with their shovels and doing agriculture, as far as tying it into stormwater management.
All right, let's see. If you opt to go with a tray installation in a commercial building, will the trays themselves comply with fire codes, i.e. non-combustible materials must be primarily used on roof decks on buildings in New York City?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there different cities definitely have all different types of fire codes. We find with the fire codes, it's typically really looked at what type of planting you do as well. Like a sedum planting, sedums have a lot of moisture in their leaves. And as long as they're irrigated and you have sedum, that typically works fine as far as fire concern. If you have ornamental grasses that could dry out in the summer, that's where you start to see, regulations that say, you can't use that type of plant material. You also will see required offsets from different building, the side of the building, you need to have 6-foot offsets or different equipment up on the roof as well to provide for fire. Also, if you have a build, I forget off the top of my head the maximum size, but there's a maximum size extent of green roof you can have before you need to leave a fire break in there as well. So there are some certain design elements, but you can include the green roof in and still meet the fire requirements.
Another question. Here we go. How well do the plastic trays hold up over time? Do they degrade and get brittle? And do the drainage systems wind up clogging up?
Yeah, great question. So our trays are, they're 100 mil thick. They're a good thickness to them, which is important. We call it shovel proof, right? So it's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to jam a shovel through it. That's important because of that fact that you are protecting a roof underneath. Our trays are recycled plastic, but not 100%. And that's because that last 2%, we're adding, what's it called? It's like the solar PV chemical that keeps it from being degraded by the sun. Because yeah, that's important. If any part of it does get exposed, the UV rays hitting it can break down plastic. So we had to add that little extra component to the trays to ensure that they don't get brittle, that they don't break over time. They're designed to last, 20 years plus.
Great. Let's see. On this question, can a certain amount of run-in be stored in tanks for irrigation?
So there's sometimes concern. I'm not 100% sure what that question is asking, but like thinking about the runoff from green roofs and what the quality of the water is. Sometimes we'll see people will, collect the runoff from a green roof in a cistern and then want to reuse that water for something else like toilet flushing. So we've had projects where this was done. And like, for instance, they had to add some signage in the bathrooms where the water was reused so that people wouldn't come and just automatically flush, because the water changes color just a little bit. And from the runoff from the soil. So people were flushing the toilets a bunch of times and they had to add signage there. So when designing a cistern for runoff from a green roof, you do need to make sure you have a good filtration process in there.
Great. All right, folks. I think we've pretty much got to the last question here. So this has been recorded, and one of the things is that both sessions will be recorded. And if you want to get either of the recordings, just drop a note to Michael Murphy, please. Like to thank everyone, especially Columbia Green Technologies, RMC Bio, and all the other sponsors, and in particular Murphy Brothers Contracting for their 10 years of continuing education involvement. Thank you everyone for showing up and for participating. Greatly appreciate it.